Welcome to Raise the Line with Osmosis.org, seeking solutions with leading experts on how to increase healthcare capacity so people can get the care they need during the COVID-19 crisis and beyond.
Hi, I'm Shiv Gaglani, and today on Raise the Line, I'm happy to be joined by Paul Freedman, who's the president of the Learning Marketplace at Guild Education, which partners with major companies and nonprofit universities to help frontline workers gain education through employer tuition benefits. The company Paul founded and led, Entangled Group, was recently acquired by Guild, and we'll be asking him about the workforce education landscape in the wake of COVID, among other things. Before I get started, I wanted to give a quick shout out to investors that Osmosis and Guild share at Felicis Ventures, Aiden Sencut and Wesley Chen, as well as the many good folks at Guild and Entangled who we've overlapped with over the years, including Jeff Watson, Michael Horn, and Rachel Carlson. So Paul, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So the first question is just telling us a bit more about your background beyond Entangled and Guild. How did you get into the edtech space?
Yeah, so I've been in the education space since, I was born, maybe before I was born. My parents were both worked in higher education. My father was a physics professor. My mother worked in administration in college campuses. And I kind of grew up in an education environment. And during that experience, I developed a great passion for what I think education is about at the end of the day, which is just changing somebody's expectations of what they can accomplish. As soon as somebody gets an education past what they expected themselves or what society expected of them, it opens up a whole new world of possibilities. And so professionally, I've been, I've always done things starting with the company I started out of college that lowered costs, increased efficacy, or expanded the access to high quality education.
Totally. And so Guild is obviously a great landing spot for that. So can you tell us a bit more about kind of how that transition from Entangled to Guild took place? Like, why did it make sense and how has it been the adjustment?
Well, it started out as a crazy idea. I mean, Rachel and I have been friends since before Guild. Entangled Group, which was an education studio that invested and started companies in the education space, was one of Guild's first investors, maybe Guild's first outside investor. And as a result, had been an advisor and very close to the business and really admired what the team and Rachel had accomplished, during sort of 5 phenomenal years of really impressive growth and impressive impact. We started a conversation that was just more about how we could be working together more closely. We had been advisors to each other's businesses, but there had been only lightweight partnership between Entangled and Guild. And it was a good time for us to just see if there's ways that we could be working together. In the course of that conversation, there were just a lot of ways that we could be working together is what we found out. And any kind of structure, investment, joint venture, it all started to get so complicated that at some point somebody had what maybe the simple idea is that we're just one company and that Guild acquires Entangled, and that's ultimately what we ended up doing. We didn't necessarily plan to do it during a shelter-in-place pandemic from the comfort of our home offices, but that part happened as well.
When I saw the news, it was pretty exciting, and I can't wait to see what you all release. I've come to know Guild. Basically, they've coined the category of education as a benefit. And can you talk to our users and our learners a bit more about what that means? And then we'll get into COVID and what it means in the context of massive unemployment.
Yeah, and it starts from a mission-driven belief. Guild believes that education is the best pathway to economic mobility, and the way they've been able to affect that at massive scale is to work with employers to provide largely a debt-free education for their employees. And I think one of the most important things that Guild's brought to the market is clear demonstration that it's in the employer's financial interest to provide this education benefit. That it increases the motivation of employees who take the benefit. It increases the retention of the employees. It has positive effects on the employer brand. It increases performance. Companies do what's in their financial best interest. That's just how they're structured. Prior to Guild, a lot of companies like to offer education reimbursements or other things, but they didn't really want their employees to take it up. What Guild has done through education as a benefit is demonstrate that actually this is a benefit you want people to take because it actually helps your bottom line, and that has made a world of difference. Now, Guild is now growing to be more than just a education as a benefit company, more than just education for the purposes of engaging employees. And we've recently released a product called Next Chapter, which works with employers who are, transitioning employees out of the company because of financial needs, and also works with companies that are looking to hire. And so what we're trying to do is expand the mission of driving economic mobility through education to a wider part of the human capital value chain.
That's fascinating. I had seen Next Chapter, which I think, would you define it as outskilling, right? Like helping people once they've left the company. Could you talk a bit more about like why do companies do that in the first place? It seems like an extra cost for a lot of the companies, right?
Well, just like when Guild was able to work with companies to demonstrate that actually investing in education for your existing employees is in your financial interest, we're now working with companies and being able to demonstrate that investing in the care and support of people who are leaving your companies is also in your financial interest. It is part of a category called outplacement. And outplacement is sort of a dinosaur industry. It's a generally poor technology, not really highly regarded by the people who are offered it. It's been in place mostly to help employers not get sued by employees that they're letting go. And what we've been working with employers on is saying, look, there's a really ethical way to do outplacement. Yes, when times get tough, businesses have to right size their staff. That's just a fact. It's an unfortunate fact, but it's a reality. But if you're going to do it, we think that there's a right way to do it. And the right way to do it is to provide as much support as you can for your employees to either find lateral positions or even better, to provide a educational benefit so that people can provide more economically resilient jobs in the future. If you do that, it will help the motivation of the people that stay behind. It will help your brand and your ability to attract talent in the future, and also help your consumer brand, because one of the most important things that consumers care about is how well big companies treat their employees. So we believe, and we think that we're demonstrating that it's worth a little bit of investment, even in tough times, to do better for the folks that you unfortunately have to let go.
So speaking of letting people go, I mean, obviously we've had the worst unemployment rate since the Great Depression, and every month brings new challenges. I'm curious, what has the impact of COVID been on Guild specifically?
Obviously, every business has been affected by COVID in a different way. It's really, you mentioned that this is the worst recession since the Great Depression. That's one of the things that's happening right now. The other thing that's happening is there's a pandemic. And then another thing that's happening is that we are in the midst of a transition to a knowledge economy and the effect of automation on our workforce. All three of those things are happening at the same time, and they're having very different impacts. One of the things that's been, very interesting is that yes, there is the greatest unemployment since the Great Depression, but businesses are also still hiring in certain areas and really ramping up hiring in certain areas. And that kind of two-sided problem is something that we expect to see continue after there's a vaccine or a cure for COVID, because we believe that's being driven by the longer term systemic changes of a knowledge economy, where you have certain positions which get automated away. And then at the same time, you have new positions that are created by technology that are really valuable for an organization. And so another driving factor for our belief that companies need to be looking at how they're investing in the education of their employees is because the needs of a knowledge economy require a lot of changes in the capabilities of your employee base, and the needs for people to be quickly trained in new technologies, to be able to cycle down areas of the business where they aren't in need anymore, but hopefully provide pathways for education and employment for people who ultimately otherwise would be just out of a job. There's not one effect in answer to your question that sort of the recession or COVID has had. It's been a lot of different effects in sort of different directions.
Like, what are some specific examples, I guess, of where you're seeing the most demand for jobs, as well as maybe where the jobs are being lost?
Well, certainly the companies that have been the most impacted have been hospitality and travel. Obviously, given shelter in place and some of the impacts there, that those companies in those industries or exposed to those industries are really having a tough time. In the jobs that are still kind of ramping up, there has been very little change as it relates to like technical or IT positions. There's going to be a near and long-term demand as it relates to increases in anything in healthcare related. And then, there's right now anything in like the logistics or supply chain, just given that now people's consumer behavior is moving from going to stores to ordering online. If you were trained to fix a diesel engine, you'd be in hot demand right now.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I actually didn't think about that particular example. Obviously, Osmosis is in healthcare education. That's where our bread and butter is. And we recently had Dara Warren of Penn Foster, the Chief Customer Officer, who I know Penn Foster is a great collaborator of yours. Can you talk a bit more about the healthcare specific demands you all are seeing, and how Guild would even say take a customer service representative at Taco Bell or Walmart and turn them into a health professional? What does that look like?
It's funny because within these silos, we think that the worlds are very, very different. But good customer service is called bedside manner in the healthcare industry, right? But competencies and capabilities and what people do in different professions tend to be more similar than different, right? Now, of course, somebody coming from who is providing excellent customer service in a hospitality environment, they will know certain aspects of what it might be like to be a CNA or, as a medical professional, there would be a lot that they don't know, right? And they will have to be trained on a lot of aspects of the job, but they're coming to the table with a lot of professional skills, a lot of customer service skills, things that will probably make them better performant in that job than somebody who is, just coming without any professional environment. So the job is to figure out people who are interested in that profession, who are motivated to work in that profession, and then providing them the education that they don't have in order for them to be successful. But it's pretty clear that, in the near and in the long term, there's going to be a tremendous amount of demand for healthcare professionals sort of up and down the stack, from phlebotomist to brain surgeon. And that's, COVID is having interesting effects on the market right now, given the need for emergency care, but the decrease in elective care. But, after COVID is passed, we know we have a demographic challenge, an aging population. We also are probably going to be faced with people who are alive but still face healthcare consequences because of COVID, and that's just going to push increased demand in the industry, really up and down the value chain.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And all those things kind of came up in the conversation with Dara. Can you talk a bit more about the scale of Guild? Like, how many people are in the company? How many employees you work with? Whatever you can share. How many students have you reached at this point?
So we just crossed 700 employees. We have 3 million employees under benefit. So 3 million employees that, through their employer partners that we're working with that have a benefit, in some cases, fully debt-free education. We typically work with Fortune 500 companies and, Fortune 1 companies. It's driven by large employers, but it's a substantial number of employees. I think there's 3.5 million teachers in the United States. So we are now serving a population that's almost as much as the entire population of teachers in the United States. And, given Guild's growth, we'll be serving a larger population than sort of all the teachers in the near future.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible scale. Do you guys work with any health institutions? I'm curious, are they mostly the employers you work with to get people into the door, or are there any health systems or medical device companies that are providing Guild as a benefit to their employees?
A couple of big companies have, very complex divisions and have healthcare operations. It's definitely a growing vertical for us, and one of the areas that we expect to see the best growth because of the dynamics that we talked about before. It's getting to be a situation where there just aren't enough trained professionals in healthcare to just hire. And so big scaled organizations that either already have and want to expand or want to build up a consumer, healthcare vertical kind of need to figure out training pathways, right? There aren't enough people out there in the market to hire. So you have to look internally and thinking about training and really start to think about, what we call sort of upskilling, which is the, taking people from more entry-level positions and then providing them education to provide, internal mobility to more advanced roles.
You mentioned education marketplaces. So your formal title is president of the Learning Marketplace at Guild. Can you talk a bit more about what is the Learning Marketplace?
Yeah, I've only done the job for a couple months, so I'm not sure I'm the expert yet. But the way Guild works is that we partner with employers, and then we partner, as you mentioned, with a curated set of largely nonprofit higher education institutions, really high quality institutions that are, we believe, the best at serving the working adult learners. That curated set of educational institutions is what we call the Learning Marketplace. And so the job of the Learning Marketplace is to partner with the universities and learning providers that we think have the best content, the best programs, the best service around our learner population, which is working adult learners. As we are growing our employer base and the headcount of the employees that we serve, we will also systematically grow the Learning Marketplace to make sure that as we have more diverse students that we're serving, that we have the right programs for them.
Got it. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I mean, there's an infinite number. I mean, it's very different training somebody to go into diesel engine repair as it is to train somebody to be a certified nurse assistant. So there's quite a diversity of fields you can include in that marketplace.
Right. And as you start to talk about millions of learners that you're serving, the kind of niche fields start to be scaled, right? Like things that are very particular fields end up being a meaningful number of students are interested in that. And what we want to do is make sure that we have a curated set of the right choices and really high quality providers, regardless of what our learner would want to go into for their life and their career.
You mentioned kind of the population, the target market you're serving are working adults, right? How many working adults are there in the US who you think you eventually want to cover? You reach 3 million now, but what is that total market? And then what are some of the things that make that group different than, say, someone who just enters college right out of high school?
Yeah, we think our population is 88 million underemployed or unemployed Americans. So we got a lot of work to do in terms of meeting the scope of our mission. What's different about working adult learners is the fact that they are leading extremely complicated lives, right? They have jobs, sometimes more than one job, often dependents, either children or taking care of their parents, and they have to fit their education ambitions into the rest of their lives. Historically, universities weren't set up for that, right? Universities were this cloistered 4-year kind of luxury experience. They were sort of set up as an affluent product for people who didn't have the complexity of lives of a working adult learner. Now, a lot of institutions have really adopted customer service models, led to online delivery, done a lot of things that make the environment better for working adult learners, but the market in general still has a lot of ways to go. And that's why, our model in the learning marketplace is to focus on a curated set of academic partners that are really doing the best for working adult learners, that have really, set up the right type of programs, have the right service model, generally have a lower price point so that they're more affordable. Because the needs are different. Now, the reality is the working adult learner is the learner of the future, right? The demographics around high school age children is declining in the United States, whereas the working adult learning population is increasing. And so institutions that get good at serving working adult learners, hopefully in partnership with Guild, are actually preparing themselves to be the institutions of the future, because that's the learner demographic that's growing.
Totally. And I've seen, again, in some of the wonderful partners you all have, not just Penn Foster, but like Southern New Hampshire University, which I think pioneered the $10,000 bachelor's degrees. So keeping things quite affordable and customer centric or learner centric. I know we're coming up in time. So the last question I have is, we tend to have a really broad audience of current and future healthcare professionals. Do you have any advice to anyone listening who could potentially be using Guild or getting education through the Guild benefit, of what they should be considering as they think about this next stage in their career, maybe a career in healthcare or something else? What are your advice for them?
If you don't have an education yet, a great way to get one is to go find an employer who provides very generous educational benefits, either with Guild or elsewhere, and work for them while they pay for your education. So, if you want a debt-free education, go get a job to go to college. And there's plenty of institutions, Walmart, Chipotle, Lowe's, and other Guild partners who would be happy to have you work there while you're learning a healthcare field. Second thing is, for those who have ambitions to work in healthcare, do it. It's an incredibly important job. It's one that our society is going to need more of, and it's one where you have an opportunity to make an impact, obviously in people's lives, and one that you also have an opportunity to provide economic stability for yourselves, your family, and your community. So if you're thinking about doing it, if you're doing it, keep it up, because the work is heroic.
Well, that's some great kind of closing advice. So Paul, thank you for taking all this time to be with us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
With that, I'm Shiv Gaglani. Thanks for checking out today's show. And remember to do your part to flatten the curve and raise the line. We're all in this together. Take care.
For more information on how you can help raise the line and flatten the curve, go to osmosis.org/COVID-19. If you like this podcast, please share it on your social channels. You can also subscribe to the series and check out all of our podcasts at osmosis.org/Raise the Line Podcast.